that person that my mom was in a relationship with, he killed her when I was 8 years old. And so that really shifted, of course, everything. For a 9 or 10 years old child to go into church on her own must have been very weird for them from the outside. But for me, I guess I felt connected. And I think that God just was literally like on my bike with me, just, pedaling with me to church. My life could have been very, very different.
Welcome to the Moms Grab Coffee podcast, where we build your trust in who God is by sharing stories of brokenness, hope, and faith. I'm your host, Hannah, and today I have my amazing friend, Rachel Hansberger, on the show. Starting from a place of tragedy and loneliness, her journey is a true testament of God's presence and protection. He truly wastes nothing that happens in her life. She's a mom to 3 beautiful kiddos, a wife to her high school sweetheart, and a former social worker who is now a mental health therapist. She's also going to share a few things you can do right now to strengthen your faith and relationship with God. So grab your coffee and get ready to be encouraged. This is Rachel's story. I want to first thank you so much for having the courage to tell your story, because I think it's incredible, really. You've been on a really incredible journey where it seems like God has shown up time and time again to be with you and walk you through some really, really difficult, heartbreaking events, all the way going back to your childhood. So I want to start off by first asking you to take us back to where it all started. What was life like as a child before you felt like you needed or want to know God?
So my story is very complex, like everybody's story, but it has lots of different pieces. And so I think the best way to kind of start is just to show you the family system that I grew up in. And so my parents met when they were teenagers, and I am one of 3 children that my mom had, and my parents divorced when I was 2. And so really, my brother and sister and I, from my mom, we didn't really have a lot of time with my dad in regards to, we lived with him until I was about 2. And then when my parents divorced, my dad moved from Maryland to Florida, and we didn't see him often. But my mom and dad because their relationship was so ingrained, I suppose, they knew each other from when they were young, that they kind of kept following each other. So after my dad moved to Florida, then we moved to Florida. But we saw my dad very infrequently. It wasn't a typical custody experience where you'd see him every other weekend. It was very rare. But my parents both had different relationships, and my mom was remarried and then divorced again, and my dad never got remarried. But my mom was in a relationship with someone when I was, I guess, around the time of being 7 years old. And they were just in a relationship. But the man lived with us. And the difficult piece of the beginning of my story, I think, is that person that my mom was in a relationship with. He killed her when I was 8 years old. And so that really shifted, of course, everything in my life and my brother and my sister's life. And so I was 8 years old, almost 9 years old when she was killed. And the day that she was killed, we actually didn't know that she wasn't alive anymore. The man that killed her told us that we weren't loved by her and that she left and she didn't want to be our mom. And so as children, we went through abandonment at that young age, but we also just were told that we weren't lovable and that we were alone. And so I think that was a feeling that stayed with me for a long time from that experience. And so the day that she went missing, we went to be with my dad, who, again, we just didn't know very well. We didn't have a close relationship with him. He was in and out of our lives. But here, my brother, sister, and I had to leave the home that we knew without knowing where our mom was, not knowing that she was dead, and we went to be with my dad.
That was all the way in Florida.
Yeah, and we lived in Florida at the time too, because my mom kind of was following my dad, so to speak. Like I was born in Maryland, and that's where their relationship started. And then my dad moved to Florida, and then we moved to Florida. So, but we, they lived about an hour and a half or 2 hours away from each other. So we left our home where we lived with our mom, and we moved in with my dad. And so, that was a huge transition. My dad has struggled with alcoholism since he was a teenager. And so that was hard. We felt very alone and not close to him, and he was struggling with his own demons. And so that's where it started. I think that's where life changed, but also just where the trauma really started. Before my mom died, our lives were pretty normal, I would say. But we were hit with that really traumatic experience. But again, from where we were in that time, we didn't know that she was dead. We thought that she left us, that she didn't love us, that, she went away, because that's what her boyfriend had told us.
Mm-hmm. As kids, you're so impressionable that, your default is to trust, right? Especially at that age.
Right. And I wrote journal entries to myself, and I, would say things like, I hope she's happy, wherever she is. Like, I hope that she's happy and that she, will come back one day, or things like that. But that really started that feeling of loneliness, but also living in a home with a father who didn't want to be what we needed him to be. And I say that because he had made comments of I didn't ask for you guys to move in with me, or I didn't expect this. I didn't prepare for this. And so it felt like we weren't, welcomed. There was a theme of feeling alone. So that really started there. And kind of fast forward a little bit, my mom died in May of 1997, and she wasn't found until September 1997. And so there was a couple of months where we just truly did not know where she was, but had this feeling of we're alone and we're not loved, and we're living with someone who isn't caring for us in the way that we need. And so that was a really challenging time. But in hindsight, looking back, I connected with God at that time. I don't really know how, and I don't really have an answer to this time where I sensed God come in at a specific point, but it was almost like a comfort that he found his way into my heart, and I found a way to connect with him. But it's not until I was an adult that I could look back and see it. But that's when it happened for me, is at 8 years old.
Did you know that God existed? Had you gone to church before?
So when my mom was alive, I was christened as a baby. We were in the church when she got remarried. But I don't recall, she gave me a Precious Moments Bible. I remember God, was a part in regards, I knew she had faith. I knew that we celebrated Christmas. I knew that, here's my Bible, but I didn't really think that was a part of our day to day. And I don't recall my mom ever speaking about God to us. When we moved in with my dad, I recall going to a local church for Palm Sunday, going for those kinds of holidays. But other than that, God was not spoken about. Prayers weren't said as a family, things like that.
Wow. Okay. So you knew God existed. You went to, the major holidays, and then you felt like God was reaching out to you at 8 years old.
I do. So yeah, I was 8 years old when I moved in with my dad, and soon right after that, I turned 9 years old. And I recall going to church alone. And I know that sounds weird, especially, 9 and maybe it was around 10 years old. But I recall waking up in the morning and getting dressed in the clothes that I felt were cute or pretty or whatever. And I would get my purse and I would get on my bike and I rode my bike to church. And I remember that experience. And I remember just, it's like you're on autopilot. Like I remember doing it and it didn't feel like, oh gosh, I have to wake up and go to church today. It didn't feel like I was nervous. It didn't feel like I was, I don't know, like alone in that. I just felt like there was like this presence kind of pushing me to do it. And it was just almost like I just knew that I needed to do that. And I recall going to Sunday school, and it's weird to think. And if I see myself from like an outer experience, I'm like, to watch what that must have looked like for a 9 or 10 years old child to go into church on her own. It must have been very weird for them from the outside. But for me, I guess I felt connected. And I think that God just was literally like on my bike with me, just, pedaling with me to church. And I think God knew that I just needed that. I needed to be away from my home where my dad was. I needed to be around adults that cared for me, and I needed to be in a presence of, in his house. And it's just amazing to think. But yeah, that's where, when I think of how long I've been walking with God, I truly believe that it was beginning at 8 or 9 years old when my dad, when I moved in with my dad, just, God just knew I needed him in that home. And I think that's where it began for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. At that point, so 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, going to church, actually wanting to go to church and be with God, what was your view of him, and what did you expect him to do for you?
I don't know that I had any expectations. I don't think that at that stage of my life, I knew much about what you could expect from God. With my children now, they're raised in a home where they learn about prayer and they learn what God wants us to do in our relationship with him. Like, they know that God wants to support us, and God loves us, and God cares for us, and God wants us to seek him. I don't think I knew that then, though. I think it was more of the environment that his house provided me that I needed or wanted or expected. But I don't think I knew that God himself was that. I think it was more of just this presence that I expected or came to expect in going to church, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And to me, it sounds like you are very mature and wise for, a young child, because even after you learned that, well, you were under the impression that your mom left, you were still hoping for her happiness. It didn't sound like you were harboring this anger or resentment inside.
No. And that's, I think, what also can be heartbreaking, like going backwards and thinking about that. And my background now, of like being a mental health therapist, to see who I was at 8 years old when she died, and to see like the journal entries, it's just amazing, like, that God made me this person, and that I've been this person for a very long time of just wanting the best for her, wanting the, like, just, so hopeful that she was doing what she needed to do to make herself happy, even if that meant that we were missing her or not with her. It's just amazing, the person that we are, from that core and who God made us. But my life could have been very, very different. Like, I think that if God was not with me, my life could have been really different. But yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about the little girl that I was, and, being told that your mom doesn't love you and that she doesn't want to be with you, and therefore she left. And then writing those journal entries, it's kind of bizarre to think that that was my life.
Yeah, it's really hard to believe. And I've come to know you very well, and you're just one of the most joyful people that I've ever met. And so when I learned of your story, I was completely shocked. You just seem really free.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I'm in social work, and to see the lives that people live, it's very eye-opening, considering, like, we all have a choice. We really do, like, have a choice to live the life that we know is for God and doing the work that we know that God wants us to do. And I firmly believe that nothing is wasted. The loss of my mother, the time that I didn't know she was gone, but just knew that she wasn't with me, and that alone feeling, having to grow up at 8 years old and live in a home where my father was an alcoholic and unable to truly take care of us in the way that we needed, but instead I took care of him in many ways. I had to grow up very quickly, but nothing is wasted. I was able to use those things that were happening to me, and I grew, and I recall being scared. I recall being hurt and sad, but I don't recall ever being angry, as an adult, angry that my mom died, because I feel like I've just always kind of known that I am who I am because of what's happened. As a child, I was angry. As a child, you go through all those experiences. I think, but as an adult, I truly have learned that the things I have gone through have been for a reason and have been because I am where I am. I do what I do, and I'm just the person that God, wants me to be. And I've been able to use those experiences.
Yeah, that's amazing. And as I hear more and more about how people's lives and frankly, the sad and tragic parts of their lives have been turned for good, that's what's really inspiring and hopeful to me. That it's exactly as you said, it's not wasted.
No, it's not. And, but the opposite side of that is just that we do have a choice. I mean, the events that have happened in my life, I could have done so many things and used my mom's death as an excuse to do them. And I could have lived in those experiences, and I could have just stuck there. I could have used people or substances or hobbies or, whatever as a way to, habits, bad things, to just say, what, I deserve this because of what I've been through. But instead, it's the opposite. It's because of what I've been through, I'm going to love differently. And because of what I've been through, I'm going to raise my children differently. And because of what I've been through, I'm going to support people that are struggling. But that's a choice,
Right.
Thank goodness that, God has been my support and my strength to make that choice.
Yeah. So give us some practical tips in terms of how you stayed on that right path, so to speak, right? Because from 8 years old, when, everything kind of fell apart family-wise, to now, your relationship has really blossomed with God and it's grown stronger. But you're right, it's a choice to stay on that path. But what did you do to keep strengthening that relationship?
I think showing up. So my relationship with God has grown so much and has gotten so much stronger since 2019. I joined the church that I belong to now, and I made the choice to get baptized, and I made the choice to get in the Word and learn and join life group and just connect with people. So I think that showing up is the way that it's going to happen. You make the choice to invite God in, but you have to keep the door open. You have to read the devotions. You have to learn about the Bible. And I am still just, feel like I'm toes deep in the water. I can't even say that I feel that confident in my knowledge of the Bible yet, because I'm still learning. And really that's just been in the last 2 years that I've been working toward that. But the practical tips is just that you have to do it. It's, people want the good feeling sometimes before doing the work as a motivation, but that's not what happens. It's after we do the work, we feel the good feeling, and that's our motivation. So I'm not going to feel super excited and ready to go exercise. I'm going to exercise and then I'm going to be like, you know what? That was great. I could do that again. And it's the same thing with getting in relationship with God. if we don't pray, we're not going to feel relief. And if we don't read his word, we're not going to feel the security that it brings. We have to do the thing. Go to church, go to a life group, read your Bible, do the devotions, to then feel the feeling afterward. And I think that's what I've really just tried to do, whether that's be just to make that time in some way, to be present with him. And honestly, the biggest thing hands down is just worship, just listening to music, Christian music that just brings me closer to him, but also just conversational prayer. My car feels like the place for me that I can truly just pray out loud and be with him and speak to him and feel so very connected. Whereas at home, when I've got my 3 kids and my husband and my dog, I can't do that, but I have to consciously make a choice to turn my radio off and talk to God. And when I do that, I just notice such a difference, but that's a choice.
Yeah, you said an interesting phrase, conversational prayer. What does that look and feel like?
So I'll start off by saying my daughter in her class, I think that her teacher says before prayer, close your eyes and just picture Jesus, because that's what she says to us when we start prayer before dinner. And I honestly, it is sweet. It's like melting your heart. But I think that's what it is for me. I think that conversational prayer is when I just expect and just believe that he's right there next to me and that we are just in a conversation together, and I just speak. I speak out loud though, because I feel like I just speak more freely. But when I do that, it just feels like I'm just sharing with him in the same way that I would share with whoever is in the seat next to me in my car. And so that's it. It doesn't feel formal, it doesn't feel like I have to say the right things. I am just speaking. And that's what conversational prayer feels like to me.
And would you say your relationship has kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of, these conversational prayers? Do you feel like it's always praising and worshiping God, or would you say you've had moments of anger and doubt and, God, where are you in this? Or, what are you doing? That kind of thing where you're experiencing all the different kinds of emotions that you would experience in a human relationship.
Interestingly enough, I don't feel like I say that to God. Like when I notice that I'm doubting or when I notice that I'm angry, it's when I've closed the door on God. I don't speak with him. I don't get in the word. I don't surround myself with people that tell me the good things that God has to offer. It's when I'm distant, right? It's when you're doing things that are not okay. When you're doing things that bring you shame, it's like I close down, and that's when I let my anger kind of be there. When I'm with him, when I'm speaking with him, when I'm praising him, when I'm praying to him, I don't have those doubts because it's like I'm letting that light in. I'm letting God in. So for me, it's really just the times in my life that I have been angry with him, I've been distant from him. I've closed the door on him, and I haven't let him be with me on that day or in that week or in that month. Or, we can even just see seasons of our lives where we're like, oh, wow, I did not let God in at that point of my life. I was not being the person I should have been, or that God would have wanted me to be. Like doing the behaviors, it's really just behaviors. I think I've always been there, but my behaviors haven't always shown that. I don't think I've ever had conversational prayer where I'm like mad at him. I just close him out.
Yeah, that's interesting because we hear that God is the source of hope and peace and joy and all of that, but you're truly living that out where you are opening the door for the hope and the peace of God to come in.
Yeah, it's visually, the door has always just been my way of understanding my relationship with him. And that's trust too, right? Because we can feel that a door is easy to open, and we can kind of think, okay, maybe that's God's, he's okay with this, or he's encouraging me with this, or, wow, this door is really, really hard to open. And we can understand like maybe it's not supposed to be open. Relationships with people can close and we have to, make that choice to leave it shut or we're, budging it open. With God, like that's always just been the imagery that comes to mind for me. It's just if I leave this door open, if I like let him in, then I'm connected to him. But when I shut it, like that's a decision, and sometimes I feel like I've probably even locked the door. Like, no, God, no, I just don't want to hear from you. Like I'm not going to let you in despite how hard you push.
Yes, I feel like we've all been there, probably multiple times. So I want to go back to one particular door that was open in 2019. So you said that was the moment where you felt like you've grown your relationship with God the most and it's become the strongest. So you said you found a church. What did finding the right church look like to you?
So I have been with my husband, married to my husband for 10 years, but we have been together for 18. Much of that time, I have been attending church alone, and that has been challenging. I've prayed for my husband. I've asked him to, I've really wanted him to come to know the Lord, but because he wasn't a believer, or maybe he was, but he wasn't a church-going believer, I did that alone. And going to church alone is hard. And I have gone to many different churches. I have tried large ones. I have tried small ones. I have tried some with friends. I have tried some solo. I have tried a church plant and a church that was working towards becoming a church. That's what I mean by church plant. And I don't know. Being alone was always such a hard thing because I was there and I wanted to be feeling comfortable, but it's just kind of hard. It was impossible not to notice that I was alone. And I felt like others noticed that too. And that was just a weird experience because I wanted to be with God. That was the reason I was going, but I felt alone while there. And that, goes back to the theme of my childhood of just alone. That's just a hard feeling to have. But the last church that I went to before my current church, the pastor decided to step away and the church kind of ended. And so I saw a sign for New Life Church and I kind of thought about it and I decided, you know what, it was a month before Easter. And so I was I really, want to go to church for Easter and I want my kids to be there. And so let's try this church. And so I went to that church and it just was the first church that I went to that I did not feel that sense of I am alone here and everyone's noticing it. It just didn't feel that way. I was able to, I let my guard down. I cried so much in the first couple of sermons and worship experiences just because it's I just felt like I was finally able to be there and just let myself be. And it was just such a cool experience. It just felt very warm and inviting. And it just felt right. And so again, things happen and we don't know why and doors close, but this opened door just felt right. And I guess it's hard to explain what that feeling was like aside from just right.
Mm-hmm. Did you call it peaceful?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the feeling of being there, certainly felt peaceful. And it just felt warm, just this is what it's supposed to be. It didn't feel, lonely, which was what I wanted for so long. And so I, began going in March 2019, and then in June 2019 at that same church, I was baptized, and my husband has come to know the Lord at that church, and 2 of my children have been dedicated in that church, and it's just amazing. I've joined life groups in that church, and I met you, and I met other friends there at that church, and it's just so amazing how that church has been so many things. And it was there during a really difficult time within our family of, my husband had an injury and, the pastors have just been so amazing. And there's just so many things that just feel right. And that it just felt like home.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. I've been on my own journey of visiting multiple churches, just trying to find that one where I can grow in my relationship with God, but also bring my family into it as well. And it's hard, but at the end of the day, when you find that church or that community that supports you and can walk with you through difficult times, it's something that nothing else can replace.
No. And I think that was one of the challenging things I've experienced when going to a really large church before. Not that you can't connect with church members at a really large church, because I'm sure that you can. But I just could not, maybe, or did not. I'm not sure. I felt like I was 1 in 1,000 and that the pastor really wasn't able to see me, or, how would I even approach these people? They're way up there and I'm way back here. And, so going to this church, eye contact was a huge thing for me. To be able to make that with the pastor was weird at first, because it was like, wow, like you actually see me,
Yes,
yes.
And
finding
exactly
a church,
what you're saying.
Yeah, finding a church that actually follows through when you ask for prayer and they're checking in on you and it's just amazing.
And that takes a lot of courage too, for you to reach out and ask for help beyond just attending church. Right? And you said it multiple times, it comes down to a choice. Like, are you going to choose to take that step? Are you going to choose to step out and connect with others, get into your Bible, pray? It all does come down to a choice. And it's so easy not to do it. There's so many distractions in the world. I mean, how many streaming services are there with millions and millions of shows? It's so easy to just tune out and, watch whatever.
Yes.
Rather than building yourself and others.
Absolutely. I don't have a lot of willpower when it comes to dessert. I really don't. But I have really strong willpower when it comes to something that I want to do. And so, for instance, I've been on maternity leave after just having my third baby. And every morning I told myself, that TV is not being turned on until you've done your life group devotion, and until you've done your daily devotion, because I knew if I didn't do it then, everything else would consume me in the day and then I wouldn't do it. So I do have a lot of willpower when it comes to things of that nature. And thank goodness I have that, because again, if I would have just sat down at 7 a.m. in the morning in front of the TV, that's hard to turn off, but
yes.
If I got into the Word first, that sets a different tone for the day.
Yes, I definitely feel it as well. Even when I get 5 minutes in the morning just to read my Bible, whatever it is, I just open it up to any chapter in the book. Let me just read this one page. It completely changes the tone of my day.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you just notice, sometimes you don't notice that evening, but you notice when looking back at your week, was that a week that I really let God in? Was that a week I really, tried to see the positive and bring that into my life? Or was that a week where I just was negative and in my own head and distant from God?
I love that. So you're assessing the past few days or the past week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a really great practice.
I really notice, COVID is making going to church difficult. But I do notice that when I'm in church in person, that's a very different beginning to my week than when I don't go to church. Because I don't know, if you're starting off, that Sunday morning with your family at church and you're able to worship and be with other people and just get good positivity versus not doing that, I'm really able to look back and say, yeah, that really started my week off not in the best way by staying home and closing God out.
Yes, I know what you mean. So, Rachel, can you summarize for our audience here? You've been through so much heartache, but you've grown through all of those events, and you've had this incredible journey. So, if you were to summarize God, what would you say He is?
God is present. God is truly our vindicator. God is strong and God is constant, God is caring. God is just, He's the everything that you need. And I really have come to learn, especially now at 33 years old, I've been able to really learn that when I seek the expectations in people, I oftentimes do get let down. And that's because what I really need to do and what I really, what God wants us to do is to seek Him in those expectations. And when I seek God and when I let Him be that source for me and take away that expectation that other people are going to be that source for me, I feel just so connected. And I feel His strength. I feel His love. I just feel like His embrace. And so He is that everything that we need. And we truly do not need it from other people. But we let ourselves think that we do, or like we hope that we can expect that from other people. But we really can't. God is that for us. And so that's challenging. I'm not saying it's easy to always remember. And there have been so many times I have put those expectations on other people, just wanting them to be that for me. But when I stop and truly remember that He is that for me and I am not alone, and He is that provider and He is that strength and that source of love, that I'm really way more at peace and really stronger for putting that on Him.
That's amazing, Rachel. So you've given us lots of tips and imparted lots of wisdom. Is there anything you want to say to other moms who are struggling with loneliness? Maybe they don't have that community yet. What can they do?
Get out of your own head. I think that, so I might be biased as a social worker, but there is help, there is support, there is connection there for you. I am a therapist that provides support to many different people for many different reasons, but underneath, just that outward label of mental health therapist, like I am a Christian. And so therefore I am able to provide positivity and love and support and connection to people, even though I have felt at times like that's impossible, like again, to expect from other people. But there is support for you, whether that's like getting out of your own head, getting dressed and going to church, starting somewhere, or starting by just learning about God and jumping into the Word, learning about who He is, and that way you can learn what to expect. But when you're doing it alone, when you're in your house by yourself or, with your family and you still feel alone, it's because you are not inviting Him in. You're not opening that door to learn about Him and to feel connected to Him. So get out of your own head, jump in to Him, let Him show Himself in you, and realize that you aren't alone in this and that you're not meant to do this alone. You need that community. You need the people, and you need friends and support from people that love God and know God too. And so I think that those friendships you're going to find at church.
Thank you so much for sharing your story today, Rachel.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
All right. I hope Rachel's story was inspiring to you. And before we end the show today, I want to remind you of a couple of things she said in her testimony. First and foremost, if you haven't tried it already, try conversational prayer and see where God takes you. Maybe it's after dropping the kids off at school or going to the grocery store. Maybe it's even in the shower. I've tried it a few times this week, and I'll be honest, it feels a little bit weird. Like I don't know what to say. But I've started with, you know what, God? Traffic isn't so great today. Just everyday things, and then see what happens. So if you have that moment, take that moment. Or you know what? If that moment of quiet is right now for you, step away from the episode and try it out. Second, when you're feeling angry or you feel yourself spiraling, make the choice to invite God in. Read the Bible, listen to worship music, imagine God in your passenger seat and have that conversational prayer. Just open that door. And lastly, show up. Find a church, join a small group, and start connecting with those around you. As Rachel put it so beautifully and simply, God is present. God is our vindicator. He is constant and He is everything that we need. Thanks so much for listening today, friends. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment and rate the show 5 stars so we can reach more moms. Also, don't forget to share it with your friends and subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. I'm Hannah, and I can't wait to grab coffee again next time.